Welcome to Backstage with Richard Ridge. My guest is making his screenwriting and directing debut in one of this season's most talked about new films called Mass, which was a runaway hit at the Sundance Film Festival. It tells the story of an emotionally charged conversation between the parents of a child killed in a mass shooting and the parents of the child responsible. The film stars four of our greatest actors: Martha Plimpton, Jason Isaacs, Ann Dowd, and Reed Birney. It will be released exclusively in theaters on October 8th. Please say hello to Fran Kranz.
Hi, Richard. Thank you.
Dude, you and I go back a while. I'm like, wait a minute, I know him from Broadway.
Yeah. Okay, Death of a Salesman, 2012, I think. You can't take it with you, 2014, 2015, somewhere right in. Yeah. I think we went over, across through the year there. And then some off-Broadway.
Yeah.
Bachelorette and at Second Stage and Illyria at the Public. I wish I'd done more theater, and I cannot wait to get back into a theater.
Well, we can't wait to have you back. But first of all, the film is sensational.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you.
Before we kick off, how are you and where are you?
Yeah, what a nice question. I don't know if I get that often. No, I'm in Boston. I'm shooting a TV show about Julia Child for HBO Max that is full of theater actors. We keep talking about how lucky we are. The pandemic blessed the show in terms of these brilliant actors that we're getting, these guest stars, Jefferson Mays, Judith Light, Bryce Pinkham, Robert Joy, and then just the cast itself, David Hyde Pierce, Sarah Lancashire. I mean, it's really, 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 really special because everybody's sort of out of work. We get to take them. But no, it's so exciting. But I have a lot to do, and it's, I'm not going to lie. I feel like a crazy person, but there will be a moment, when you get to sort of take this all in, I know, and it'll be special. But look, like you said, the movie it's very sensitive subject matter. And so I have what I'd like to think is a healthy, appropriate amount of, concern about how it'll be received. I want it to be received well, and I would love, I don't have any direct experience with anything like this, and that, nothing would be more meaningful to me in this film coming out than knowing that people who have, or communities that have been directly offended, feel like I was just paying attention, you know what I mean? And that I put my heart and soul into this. That's something that is on my mind for sure.
Okay, so without giving too much away, how do you describe the film?
I mean, there's so much theater and love of stage just in this film's DNA. A lot of it, a big portion of this is for people speaking at a table in a parish hall of a church. It contains a very long conversation, a really emotional, intense conversation. I feel like it's a conversation that's compelling to sit through, for that length of time. But it's unique in that way. The film is unique. It's intimate. There's 7 actors, but the majority of the film is these 4 in a room. It started as a film. I've always wanted to make, direct films, and the first draft was a screenplay, but very quickly I realized, look, this is mostly 4 people in a room. This could be a play. And so for most of its written life, it was a stage play. And then at that kind of 11th hour, I pivoted back to making a movie. Mostly because I was just so desperate to make it, and I thought I could do that faster than a play. It would still make a great play, and I'm always on the phone talking about stage rights with our distributors. Yeah.
No, I love that, because I think I saw Reed Birney say that he was given the script early on when it was a play.
Yes, I have emails from October 2018. I don't know if this is sad or what, but I've been going through emails, just trying to sort of remember all that has happened in the last 3 years. So October 2018, I sent it to him, and I told him I'd love him to play Richard. And I think he wrote me back the next day, and he knew me as an actor. So he thought, he was surprised. And he said he'd be honored to play Richard. It was sweet. I get emotional thinking about it. But I wrote it for him. I wrote it for him in mind. I never expected I would get the names, right? I knew I was going to make this for very little money, but I wanted theater actors. I wanted people with that stage experience because it needed that talent. It needed that know-how of naturalism. And that's what it was going to be. It was going to be 4 people in a room for the majority of the film. And I wanted to leave them alone. I wanted to do the table work and the homework, but otherwise the plan all along was to just keep them as secluded and a working organic unit as best as possible, which is, a true ensemble. And, theater actors, it's sort of in their blood. It's what they love to do. So I always had that in mind. And all four of these actors have great stage experience, obviously.
Okay, we'll get into them right away. I mean, they are brilliant. This is the most perfect ensemble. Like I said, you have 4 of the greatest actors of their generations. I mean, Martha, Jason, Anne, Reed. Yeah. I mean, okay, what was it like being in the room with them during rehearsals?
Yeah, first the rehearsal was key, and Martha, I hadn't done anything. The 4 actors loved the script, but it was kind of a leap of faith, right? And they wanted to get to know me. They wanted to know sort of who I was and if my heart was sort of in the right place. Obviously, I knew Reed, but with Martha, she came on board, I think, second. And she said, there has to be a rehearsal. And, we kind of have we share a theater background. So I said, absolutely, I know, we need it. And because of schedules, we ended up with a 3-day rehearsal, which was not what we all would have, that was not the desired amount of time, the ideal amount of time. But so we found a space right in Times Square, and it felt like we were rehearsing a play. I mean, it was like doing table work for a play. It was like those first couple weeks, which is, I think any actor worth their salt, that's some of the best time that you can have. Actors love that, just sitting around dissecting the text and getting to know one another. And I had worked with Mike Nichols on Death of a Salesman, and he was 80 years old. He wasn't moving around much, right? And he'd lived such an extraordinary life that most of what he did as far as direction for the majority of that rehearsal process, eventually we got on our feet, but for a long time, we just sat around talking, listening to stories from Mike. And he was, he'd tell funny stories, sad stories, embarrassing stories. He was an open book. He was so vulnerable, and it allowed us all to do that. It set a tone. It set the bar for how the process would go and how we could all speak to each other. And we became kind of a family doing this great American play about family. And in many ways, it was like group therapy. And so I had these 4 people having this intense conversation in this film, incredibly sensitive, incredibly emotional. And I always thought, I'm not Mike Nichols, but I wanna set that tone. I got to figure out a way to set that tone. And so my goal in that rehearsal was to be an open book, and whether it meant embarrassing myself and telling the most personal, my deepest, darkest secrets, I had to. I was trying to prepare myself to be that person and just break the ice. And Ann Dowd is that person, and she came in and thankfully sort of did that for me, and she set the tone, sharing a part of herself. But and then like I said, it broke the ice, and we were all able to do that, and we became so tight in this kind of intense 3-day rehearsal that when we arrived in Idaho, I think about 3 weeks later, we were and still to this day, close friends. We love each other. There's a bond that the 5 of us have, and it started that first day. And a credit to Anne, but that's where we had to go. We had to be in this emotional place. We had to speak and dig into things in ways that most material doesn't ask of you. And thankfully we got there in this kind of 72-hour, whatever weekend in Times Square. Yeah.
I cannot believe you had 3 days of rehearsal.
Oh my gosh, yeah. We actually, I shouldn't admit this. It terrified me at the time because it was such a successful rehearsal, like I said, but we never read the conversation through without stopping. Like that never happened. And I felt like a failure. I was like, how did you not just do a read through of it and hear it? But we stopped. There was always, at least one person who wanted to stop and talk and question it. But, that's also what we were there for. That is what table work is. And so it was, in retrospect, I look back and think, well, it was perfect, and this movie's had every break it could get. Things keep working out for it. But it's what we needed to do. It's what those actors needed to do. They needed to, pick it apart and track it, everything. And so it was effortless. So it flowed and could carry them to these places that they had to go.
Like I said, you had the best of the best. Like I said, 3 days. I'm sure they could have done this, in one day. I mean, it's the best of the best.
Yes, I agree. Yeah.
But I want to ask you, so, okay, you had these rehearsals. Then I think I read somewhere where you would run to a coffee shop and do rewrites, like frantically do stuff that you learned in the room.
Yeah.
Now, you had gone to a coffee shop and there was a wonderful table of women who were sitting next to you watching this. Please tell our audience what that conversation was like. What happened that day?
Yeah, I'm going to cry probably.
Don't cry, please. I love this. This is...
Yeah, it was exhausting because I was changing it and I wanted to change it for the actors. I said, if it's not working, let's change it. Something I learned from Richard Nelson. We can talk more about that. It was one of the days and I went, I was sitting it was a coffee shop, Times Square, and there were about 5 women sitting nearby, and I had this big, giant folder and script, and I'm just like scribbling and reading notes, and it looked like a crazy person. And they're like, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, I'm it's a film. We're rehearsing a film. I wrote it. I'm directing it. I'm just doing notes, whatever." And obviously they asked, what's it about? And I've always been sort of sheepish about this, maybe for obvious reasons. Also, in so many ways, I don't know where this thing even came from. You know what I mean? It's been a surprise to so many people, including myself. And I told them about the plot, and they said, "We just had one," and they were from Santa Fe, Texas, and it was. I don't know. It's hard to think of the right words. It was obviously emotional, but it just felt like I was on the right track, and that this is just everywhere. And there was this sense of this is an art house movie. This is an independent cinema. These little art house theaters and people in LA and New York will see it, things like that. And I always felt, no, this is bigger than that. This is about something that's affecting all of us, not necessarily directly like that and like these 5 women in their town, but all of us. And it felt like a this incredibly important moment in the process, and that I was, that it was like stay the course kind of thing, and that you got to do this and you got to give it everything. And because I'm still exhausted. I still haven't rested. So yeah. Anyway, it was just a really powerful moment, and because I reminded me also that this story is fiction, but the events that inspired it are not. And we sort of owe a commitment to it because of that. We owe a special, distinct, unique kind of commitment to the work because of that.
Yeah. I'm sure you sat there saying, oh my gosh, I was meant to meet these ladies today. we all heard about the mass shooting stories. You know, I read these things on the feeds and it's just devastating. And some of
Mhm.
us know people who knew people affected by all this stuff. And the whole gun thing has totally gotten out of control in schools and everything else. And it must have been that defining moment for you when you left that rehearsal room, went to this coffee house, you know, and try to write this thing like, wait, I was meant to meet these women at
Yeah.
that moment. And like you said, you were on the right track of doing what you wanted to do with this thing.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It was, I mean, look, I get, you see how emotional I get
Oh,
now. When I told people, I remember telling that story in Idaho at lunch, and like falling apart, you know? So yes, it felt like a defining moment in this whole journey, you know, in the
yeah.
kismet of it, you know?
So how did it change from the beginning? Like I said, you were doing rewrites when you finally had these four actors in your room and you're like,
Yeah.
oh my God, you know, Martha's character would now talk this way, or, you know, Reed or Anne. I mean,
Yeah.
did it change a lot from what you started at to the shooting script that you shot in Idaho?
You know, it's I feel like in that final you know, chapter of the writing process, let's say in the rehearsal, I feel like you know, it probably to a casual observer might not have looked, that might have been the least amount of change, right? I mean, it was a bit more subtle than that. You know, I'd been working on the script for a year or more or whatever. You know, my early drafts were, you know, in the spring of 2018, and so this was October 2019. So, you know, some time had passed. You know, luckily I wasn't a writer. You know, this is the first thing I've ever really done. And so I think I was, I'm not trying to compliment myself. I just think I didn't know. I was humble with notes. I really tried to just listen to everything and hear every note. Things were sacred to me, but I was trying to be open. I also, like I said, I had this incredible experience with Richard Nelson at the Public Theater doing this play, Illyria. And he allowed us, if things weren't working, if there were bumps in the sort of story or in our tracking our character and our through line, things like that, that he would want to change it. And I was sort of frustrated because I thought, no, this is my job. Let me figure it out. Just give me a second. But it's a thing that I later look back on and learn, no, that was so important. And for this process, I was trying to do a similar thing. Richard talks about verisimilitude. His plays are, they're real life on stage. You know, the actors, he doesn't present to the audience. The actors don't, you know, cheat out. They eat food around a table and face each other, and they speak to each other in the volume that they would at that distance. There's not projecting. It's a really unique theater experience. And look, I was doing this trying to achieve that level of realism. So I allowed, you know, I did a lot of work on my own. I did a couple read throughs that were major in terms of tweaking things. Each level of research, I think I dug deeper. In terms of each, you know, I read about many different shootings, and it just got more and more emotional and deeper. But those actors, when we got there, they did become kind of co-authors. I got to read this quote from Granville Barker, this English director, in this, like, an essay on acting and theater. And he said, let him realize that the more he can learn to ask of the actor, the more he will gain of his play. Richard told us that, and he read us this essay, and this is a postcard I sent to him. I just knew I had to do that. And so, you know, Martha, she sort of felt like we're skipping a step here, right? We'd write it. We'd write that step. Reed, same thing. Jason, Anne, all of them. It's hard for me to be specific because, I mean, to be honest, I just don't quite remember. But I had to be, and it was a little scary because you end up fighting for things you love, right? And I had to give on a lot of stuff, and certain things I'd say, just, you know, please just do it, you know. But it was, but it was, look, that what they had to do. Like I said, I want to kind of leave them alone, like as if they were on stage. You know, I kept the crew inside of the parish hall, that room, that set, minimal. I had a first AD that I thought had a really good bedside manner. You know, it was treated almost like a love scene. You know, and I tried to stay away and limit my interaction and just kind of let them be there. And so it was so important that they had such strong knowledge and ownership of their roles going into it. And I think allowing these kind of ebbs and flows and tweaks and these minor changes to help them with that was just, it was something absolutely necessary.
I can't believe is the first thing you've written. Your character development is so brilliant. The suspense you set up from the second you meet everybody at that parish hall. First then the couples arrive and you're like, and I didn't do a lot of research before I watched the film. I said, I don't really want to know anything about except a little bit I know.
Yeah.
And the stories of the two couples arriving there could have been anything.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, anything. This getting together with them could have been about 10 different subject matters. And then you don't know who's connected to who. It is just the suspense, the emotional, just the way you wrote these. But again, this is your directorial debut as a filmmaker. It's so brilliant. I have to give a shout out to your editor, which is it Yang?
Yang Hua Hu. Yeah, Yang Hua.
Mm-hmm. And then your cinematographer,
Ryan Jackson Healy.
Oh,
yes.
It never stops. I mean, give a shout out to those two because it's the four of them in this room and it just moves so beautifully.
Yeah.
It stays in when it has to, but it keeps moving. It's claustrophobic. It's emotional. You get caught up with everybody, but just give a shout out to those two.
Absolutely. No, they were brilliant. Jay Davis was also an editor on the film who did some additional editing. So those guys... Because I didn't know what I was doing. I had a total panic attack when we finished and just shut everything down for a few weeks while I could learn how to use Premiere Pro, the editing software, because I freaked out thinking I was just handing my movie over. Ryan, it's beautiful. I kind of sit back and think, I wrote the gaffer, Frances Kroon. She's South African. She's over there now. And we were just exchanging some texts. And I thought she did such a beautiful job and how they work together in the light and how it evolves so subtly over the film. The pacing, Yang Hua. I mean, I don't know how Yang Hua even started this because we had two cameras in the room. You had, 70, 100 hours of dailies on two different cameras. I mean, it was an overwhelming amount of footage, but I guess that's just what editors do. But look, they did a brilliant job, and it's I honestly, I wanted to pick out an unremarkable room, and I think back, I look at it sometimes, and I think, how does it look so beautiful? How does it take on some other quality like that? And it's a credit to those guys for sure. But I do think it's so much of the story, so much of what these actors put into it. And it's this, it's so filled with emotion. There's a shot early on, and I got to shout out to the supporting actors, Brita Wool, Kagan Albright, and Michelle Carter, who did this incredible job of setting up the film. That whole setup was very much inspired by, I love Annie Baker, and I wanted to have a supporting cast, a kind of small town, sort of the kind of quirky opening. And I was always thinking of those Annie Baker plays and some of her characters. But they did that whole setup, and there's a shot where they enter that parish hall for the first time, and we just sit inside before they come in and the lights are off. And I'll get emotional again. It means so much to me because it's like the room can handle what's about to happen there. And it takes on this incredible, it becomes this charged, sort of sacred place by the end, that when I don't want to give anything away, but when the actors finally leave, you look at this place and with whole new eyes, and to think what happened there. It's just, it's incredible. It's emotional.
It's funny that you say that, because they walk in the room, she looks at it, she goes, let's start with the table.
Oh, yeah.
Have it centered, like that table, like this room has seen many emotional conversations in the past and is still standing. But like I said, so you had two cameras in the room. How long was the shoot?
It was 14 days. We had 9 days in the room, but I really say 8 because the first day was getting everyone seated, right? And Michelle Carter, who plays the sort of the mediator, so to speak, when she closes that door, that was the end of the first day. So that conversation, which is about 75 minutes, was shot in 8 days, and it was. I mean, everything had to go right in terms of weather, in terms of sunlight. It was basically starting to get it was dark in Idaho at like 5 o'clock. So it was intense, but it worked out. But Ryan and I, the key was we didn't want to overthink it. I had this sort of mantra that the director can never get in the way. Like I can't make some choice. We have to be invisible. And so we tried not to overthink it. We thought about My Dinner with Andre is basically 4 setups. It's kind of the 2 of them and some close-ups and maybe the mediums. I mean, it's pretty simple. So we thought, let's not overthink this. Let's develop a system. So we had our days always mapped by, we'd go on this side with the sunlight. Then we had, we would have a dolly and we just each day developed a way to tweak this system, that each day we'd introduce movement, we'd introduce more dolly movement and close-ups, things like that, and eventually deteriorating into a handheld that we wanted to have a seamless transition. So as an audience, you don't even realize that you've entered handheld cinematography, as things get more emotional and deteriorate, and then be even there's a sort of climactic like moment where Jason Isaacs' character Jay talks about the event in detail, and after that moment we switched to a different lens, an anamorphic lens, a much wider lens, and that the idea being that once we relive this event, or once that event happened in these characters' lives, their perspective was forever changed. That it's the world's never the same, right? And so we wanted to have that effect visually and enter a sort of a new space that they've kind of graduated or sort of entered some sort of new emotional realm. And then at that point things slowed down. We were doing about 10, 12 pages a day for the first 5-6 days, and then once we got into anamorphic and the movie becomes incredibly it's always emotional, but it kind of enters a new space. We only had 1 camera because of the width, and so we moved down to about 3 or 4 pages a day. Sorry to be so specific, but
no, we have a lot of filmmakers watching this, and want to be filmmakers. And like I said, it's a flawless film. I mean,
I see mistakes.
Okay, so I was going to ask you, when did you finally sign off on this? I mean, I know your wife and you got a daughter now, where they were like, give it away. Like, when did you finally say, I'm done?
It's funny. It was around Father's Day 2020, because I can kind of remember. I had, we were supposed to sign off. I was supposed to much earlier, and I kept tweaking. If you gave me money, I'd still go back and to do the sound mix. I would do the sound mix on that movie forever, because we were like adding barking dogs outside. I mean, it was becoming just obsessive. And but you have to. Someone told me. I mean, I've heard this a lot. There's this saying that you don't finish a film, you abandon it, and it was. It took a toll on my life. I mean, I'll just be totally honest. I put everything into this, even financially. And so it got to a point where I just had to stop, but I think that's where it is. And that's what this saying means. You don't really finish it, you abandon it. There gets to a point, and it was, we had edited, thankfully we started editing before the pandemic. We had a screening in Los Angeles, February 24th, 2020. We probably should not have all been sitting in a theater together, but we were, and we didn't know any better. And we, thank God, because it was a rough cut screening, and everybody was basically crying, and I knew we had it. The movie worked. And then we spent basically the next few months trying to rethink it and see if, trial and error, and see what more we could do and how we could shorten it and tighten it up. And so it got to that point. Sorry, that was probably I could have just given you a date, but yeah.
No, I think
it's hard. It's very hard saying we're done, Yeah.
I want to talk about, it's such an emotional journey that these 4 actors go on. And I know they are totally professional, but I heard they would lighten up in the room in between. There was a lot of humor in between. Was there? Like in between takes?
They're all hilarious. I mean, they're all really, really funny, really funny. And I think that just happened naturally. It's just who we all are. I mean, that's another thing. The movie still surprises me. It's not very indicative of my personality, I feel like, and I hope that's an appropriate thing to say. It's you know, I'm in a lot of comedies and stuff, and I don't, you know, I like to laugh, and we all did. And yeah. I think, you know, as they've said this as well, you know, talking about how we laughed a lot. It was an outlet. It was a way to handle it. I mean, I have, you know, I don't know if I'll ever show it, but there's like a blooper reel. I mean, that is, and it's not that it was being insensitive or disrespectful to the material. It was almost the only way to deal with it. It was almost the only way to be that vulnerable. I mean, these guys were just sort of weeping all over each other. It gets pretty messy. And, you know, at a certain point, it's what else can you do? What else can you do but laugh? Like, how else can you live with this? I mean, Ann Dowd, you know, talks about how Linda, her character, let her in. You know, these actors, they're, like you said, they're as good as it gets. And I've worked with some incredible actors, but I've never seen this kind of level of possession of a part that you can be so emotionally invested and sustain that intensity of emotion and the despair and the grief that these characters show. I think it was a way, I think it was a way to cope, you know?
Well, like I said, it is absolutely brilliant. We are just about out of time. I want to congratulate you on the Sundance Film Festival. I mean, you took the Sundance Film Festival by storm. I have been reading all the reviews. The reviews are sensational. I know that Bleecker Street has got the distribution rights for the US. Sky Cinema has got UK and Ireland. I have people who cannot wait to see this film.
Yeah.
Like I said, this has been really great. It exclusively starts to premiere in theaters on October 8th. Fran, this has been great catching up with you. Congratulations on your first, you know, screenwriting and directorial debut. It's flawless. So it's really a beautiful, beautiful film.
Thanks, Richard. It means a lot. It means so much to me how much you know about the film. I mean, I thank you. I genuinely, it means a lot to me. I really appreciate it. Hearing you speak about it really touches my heart. Thank you.
Well, I'm catching up with your actors this week too. I cannot wait.
Oh, awesome.
I can't wait to be in the room with them. I've known them all from stage. So like I said, congratulations, my friend. And everybody, go see Mass. And for all your theater coverage, please join us here at BroadwayWorld.com. Stay safe, everyone. Fran, good to see you, my friend.
How many people are coming?
There'll be 4 of them. Richard, Linda, this is Jay and Gail Perry.
Thank you for agreeing to meet us.
You're welcome. I'm gonna leave you alone. Let me know if you need anything. You say you want to heal. Is this how?
We're not here to attack you, and we promise that. We want to know how this happened. We need your help with that.
I'm willing to help.
When you talk about blame on your part, I want to know what you're referring to.
It's very hard to answer.
Well, please try.
It's not just one thing.
Tell me about your son.
What would you like to know?
Everything. I want to know everything.
Why?
Why do I want to know about your son? Because he killed mine.
It's not our fault, Richard.
No!